Today we're going to analyze one of Australia's most enduring and frankly, most profoundly tragic mysteries, the disappearance of the Beaumont children. This case, now nearly 6 decades unsolved, didn't just haunt a family. It really fundamentally altered Australian society's entire perception of safety, of innocence.
That's absolutely right. And our objective here really is to embark on a meticulous analysis of the facts. We need to look at the historical accounts, the witness statements, the subsequent police investigations, and, multiple, often conflicting theories that have emerged over the last half century.
And to do that impartially.
Exactly. We need to look at the evidence impartially to understand why this investigation remains active and why it's demanding. It still captures international attention as a classic example of an unsolved, high-profile missing persons case.
So let's start with the victims, the children themselves. Jane was the eldest, she was 9, Arnna was 7, and little Grant was just 4 years old. And they vanished on the 26th of January, 1966, Australia Day, from Glenelg Beach in South Australia.
A public holiday. A crowded beach.
Yes, and the case is officially recorded as a suspected abduction and murder.
And that's critical. The case officially remains an unsolved cold case. The South Australian government still maintains a significant $1 million reward for information that leads to a breakthrough.
$1 million.
$1 million. And that standing reward, it tells you everything about the lack of closure and the commitment of the state to, hopefully one day find an answer.
That reward speaks volumes. And it's hard to overstate the initial societal impact this had. This event led to an instant, profound cultural shift. It immediately dismantled the presumed safety of unsupervised children in Australia.
It was an immediate loss of innocence for an entire nation.
It really was.
So we aren't just analyzing a crime here. We are, in a way, dissecting a major social turning point, one that's defined by decades of confusion, of failed leads, and speculation that continues to this day.
So to appreciate the scale of that trauma, we have to ground ourselves in the timeline of events. What happened on that summer day in 1966?
Let's start right at the beginning.
Okay, let's unpack the morning. The family home in Somerton Park. We have Jim Beaumont, the father. He was a former serviceman and at the time a taxi driver. And Nancy Beaumont, the mother.
And they lived, as you said, in Somerton Park, a suburb of Adelaide. Specifically about 3 kilometers from Glenelg Beach.
Which is not far at all.
No, it's a very short distance. And that's a key factor.
Why so key?
Because Glenelg Beach was a popular spot that children visited frequently and independently. It was just a normal routine for them. In fact, just the day before they vanished, Jim had dropped the children off there himself before leaving on a 3-day sales trip up to Snowtown.
So they knew the area.
They knew the area. They knew the bus route.
Yeah.
They were trusted to navigate this short journey themselves. It was, completely normal for the time.
So they were comfortable with the routine, and that obviously reinforced the parents' confidence in letting them go alone. And the day itself, January 26th, Australia Day, was in the middle of a significant summer heat wave.
Right, which meant the beach area was particularly crowded that morning. The kids asked Nancy if they could go again, and she said yes.
And they took the bus.
They did. They caught the bus at 8:45 in the morning, a short, maybe 5-minute journey. And the expectation from their mother was very precise. They were to return home on the 12 o'clock bus, the noon bus.
That precise schedule, based on the bus timetable, became the moment the first crack appeared in the day.
It did. The alarm bell started ringing when that 12 o'clock bus arrived, and they weren't on it.
So Nancy would have become worried then.
Concerned, yes. But the sources suggest not full-blown panic. Not yet.
When did that start?
When they also failed to arrive on the 2 o'clock bus, 2 hours later. That's when the urgency escalated dramatically.
And Jim, the father, he was away on his sales trip.
He was, but he cut it short. He must have had a feeling, or Nancy called him, but he returned home early, around 3 p.m. He arrived to an already distraught wife, and Jim didn't wait. He drove immediately to the beach, which was still incredibly crowded, to search for them.
And he found nothing.
Nothing. He returned home, and then he and Nancy undertook this desperate search of the immediate area. They were checking streets, visiting friends' houses, anywhere they might have gone.
What's so fascinating, and I think psychologically revealing about the time, is that even though the children were hours late, the parents' first instinct wasn't immediate disaster.
No, it wasn't. The thought was that they'd simply lost track of time, or maybe found an exciting playmate and forgotten the schedule.
An idea that just seems so foreign today.
Absolutely. But that assumption, it couldn't hold up past the early evening.
Yeah.
By 5:30 p.m., the painful reality had set in. They went to the Glenelg police station to officially report their 3 children missing.
That time lag, from noon to 5:30.
Yeah.
It's unimaginable now.
It is, but it reflects that profound underlying trust in the safety of public spaces that existed in 1966 Australia, a trust that was about to be shattered forever.
So the official response, initially it would have echoed that same assumption, right? That they were probably just lost.
Initially, yes, but that assumption evaporated within hours. The sheer scale and the speed of the search escalated dramatically.
But the news spread quickly.
Incredibly quickly. Within just 24 hours, the case had gained massive national attention right across Australia.
The police search must have scaled up just as fast.
It did, almost instantly.
Hmm.
They started, of course, with Glenelg Beach, the sandhills next to it, the ocean, all the nearby buildings. But they very rapidly moved to a national search protocol. They were monitoring the airport, checking the rail lines, inspecting interstate roads.
So they quickly moved from lost to something else.
Right. That rapid shift in strategy indicated that the authorities quickly changed the possibility from lost to potential abduction or a serious accident.
And the public fear, from what the sources say, it outpaced even the official terminology.
It did. Within just 3 days, by January 29th, the anxiety was palpable. The Adelaide Sunday Mail ran a headline that was just stark. It said, "Sex crime now feared." It shows how quickly the public consensus went from a missing persons case to the worst possible tragedy.
And yet there's a detail in the reports about the reward.
Yes, despite that massive national alarm and press coverage, the initial official reward was only £250.
Which seems so small.
It's a small but very telling detail. It highlights the procedural gap between public panic and the standardized police response to a missing persons case in that era.
And the police were scrambling. They were throwing resources at any potential lead, no matter how remote.
Which brings us to the draining of the Padawalonga boat haven.
A huge undertaking.
A massive one, and it happened very early on January 29th. It was prompted by a woman who claimed she had spoken with 3 children, matching the Beaumont's description near the haven at 7 p.m. on the night they disappeared.
That's hours after the parents reported them missing.
It is. So police cadets and emergency operations, they swarmed the area and the boat haven was fully drained.
It must have been fueled by just desperate hope.
Absolutely. The problem was that when the water receded, there was nothing. Nothing was found.
So another dead end?
A very public, very painful dead end. This early, unsuccessful effort, it really underscored the immediate, desperate nature of the search and the readiness of everyone, the public and the police, to pursue even highly improbable late-night sightings.
So now we have to shift from the search efforts to what is arguably the most compelling evidence investigators have ever had, the witness accounts. And these all point toward a definite narrative involving a potential prime suspect.
Yes. Multiple witnesses provided a remarkably consistent description of a man who was seen with the children at Collie Reserve, which is right near Glenelg Beach.
And that consistency is really unusual, isn't it?
It's highly unusual in missing persons cases. It gave the police a very strong initial profile, which they compiled into what Australians call an identikit, a composite sketch.
What was the description?
He was described as a tall man in his mid-30s with fairish to light brown hair, a thin face, and a suntan complexion. He was of a medium, sort of thin to athletic build and was wearing swim trunks.
And that profile?
That profile has been the single most defining feature of this entire investigation for 60 years.
What's critical here, though, is not just what he looked like, but the behavior that was reported.
Exactly. The children, particularly Jane, were known by their parents to be very, very shy.
Yet the witnesses saw them playing with this man. They appeared relaxed, confident, even enjoying themselves.
They weren't distressed. They weren't frightened or, struggling to get away. Nothing like that.
So this appearance of familiarity and relaxation, it led investigators to a crucial theory.
It did. The theory was that the children must have known him, or at the very least, trusted him. This was not a random snatch by an immediate stranger. It implied grooming. The relationship built up over previous visits to the beach.
And that theory wasn't just speculation. There was something that supported it.
There was. A detail that Nancy Beaumont later recalled. A seemingly casual remark that Arnna had made to her shortly before the disappearance.
What was it?
Arnna told her mother that Jane had got a boyfriend down the beach.
Oh, wow.
Nancy had dismissed it at the time, thinking it just meant a simple playmate, a friend.
But in retrospect,
that comment took on a massive, heartbreaking significance.
We also have details about the man himself, that he was interacting with other people. He seemed very confident.
Unusually so. He actually approached one witness, asking if they had seen anyone near the children's belongings because he claimed their money was missing.
Which is just a brazen thing to do.
It is. And then he went off to change his clothes while the children just waited for him, alone. It further suggests this casual, trusted connection.
And the group was later seen walking away from the beach together.
Yes, at around 12:15 p.m. This places the prime suspect with the children right after the time they were expected home.
They were supposed to be on that noon bus home for lunch.
Correct. And then there is the extended timeline. A subsequent confirmed sighting, this one by a woman named Daphne Gregory, placed the children with the man about 2.5 hours later.
So this is mid-afternoon now.
Mid-afternoon. And at this point, the man was observed carrying an airline bag that was similar to one that Jane owned.
The fact they were still out, unhurried, with him, well into the afternoon.
It suggests the disappearance wasn't a quick, opportunistic crime. It was more like a planned operation. It involved a level of persuasion or coercion that kept the children calm and compliant.
And if we connect all these elements, the financial clue discovered at Wenzel's Bakery becomes the linchpin of this whole trusted adult theory.
It really does. A shopkeeper on Mosley Street reported that Jane had come in and purchased pasties and a meat pie.
And the shopkeeper knew the children.
Knew them well from their routine visits. And she noted two incredibly important things.
Okay.
First, they had never, ever purchased a meat pie before. This suggests their normal routine was already being altered by this adult companion.
And the second thing?
The second and most critical detail is that Jane paid for the purchase using a £1 note.
And why is that specific detail so crucial?
Because it proved the companion was an adult who had supplied them with money. Their mother, Nancy, had only given them 6 shillings and 6 pence.
Which was just enough for...
Just enough for their bus fare and their modest lunch. To put that in perspective for you, 6 shillings was about 33 cents. Just enough for basics.
And a pound note.
A pound note was nearly 4 times that amount. It represented a significant gift or payment at the time. It confirmed they were with someone who had disposable income and had deliberately given them money.
And these were responsible children.
Very responsible. They wouldn't have typically bought something new, and they certainly wouldn't have possessed that much money unless someone else had provided it.
So this detail, it just solidified the consensus that the children were with an adult who had their trust and was facilitating their activities.
Yes. And that is why the postman's account initially caused such confusion for investigators.
Right, the postman.
A postman, considered a highly reliable witness because he knew the children well, he initially gave a statement that he saw them walking alone at 2:55 p.m. along Jetty Road, heading in the general direction of their home, and he said they were holding hands and laughing.
That statement just completely derails the established timeline.
Completely. If they were already hours late, why were these reliable children strolling alone, laughing, and seemingly unconcerned? It presented a massive, almost unsolvable contradiction.
It suggests maybe the adult had dropped them off?
It did, but then why the massive delay? Fortunately for the consistency of the investigation, the postman contacted the police 2 days after his initial statement. To clarify,
And what did he say?
he stated that upon reflection, he believed he saw them in the morning, not the late afternoon as he had originally reported.
That retraction was crucial then.
It was. It removed the sighting of the children walking alone and unconcerned hours after they were due home. And it strongly reinforced the idea that the 12:15 and the later afternoon sightings with the man were the final credible observations.
But the public remained, in a state of high anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. And it's important to note that reported sightings continued for about a year after the disappearance. They came from all over Australia.
Which just demonstrates the high emotional investment.
And the widespread, ultimately fruitless, attempts by the public to help solve this terrible crime.
So the lack of success with physical searches and witness accounts meant the case attracted worldwide attention. And this led to some truly unusual and expensive attempts to find closure.
The desperation of the community eventually led them to the involvement of a Dutch psychic, Gerard Croiset.
Right.
The vacuum of answers was so complete that the public was willing to try anything. Croiset was flown to Australia in November 1966 to assist. It caused an absolute media frenzy, both locally and internationally.
But his involvement was defined by confusion, wasn't it?
It was. His story seemed to change almost daily, and he ultimately offered no concrete clues that could be actioned immediately. He eventually settled on identifying a specific location, a warehouse near the children's home. He claimed their bodies were buried inside, specifically within the remains of an old brick kiln on the property.
And the property owners, they weren't exactly keen on this idea.
Well, no. Understandably, they were reluctant to demolish their building based solely on the claim of an overseas psychic.
But the public pressure must have been immense.
It was. And the craving for answers was huge. A staggering $40,000 was raised through public donations just to have the building demolished for a search.
$40,000 in 1966. That is an astonishing sum.
It's a massive sum, and it was spent on a lead based entirely on a psychological reading, not a shred of forensic evidence.
And the result was heartbreakingly zero.
Zero. The demolition and the subsequent search found no remains, no clothing, no evidence tied to the missing children.
But even that didn't kill the lead entirely, did it?
No. Decades later, in 1996, the same building was undergoing a partial demolition, and the owners, sensitive to the ongoing pain of the case, allowed a full search of the site once more.
And
again, no trace of the children was found. It just cemented the failure of that high-profile, incredibly expensive, and emotionally draining endeavor.
And if that wasn't enough psychological trauma for the parents, we have to discuss what might be the cruelest act of all, perhaps even surpassing the initial abduction.
The hoax letters.
The hoax letters.
Yeah.
About 2 years after the disappearance, the Beaumont parents received 2 letters, both postmarked from Dandenong, Victoria.
And what's just devastating here is the calculated psychological torment. One letter was purportedly written by Jane, the other by a man who claimed to be the children's guardian and said he was keeping them safe.
And the notes described a relatively pleasant existence.
Yes, a happy existence, which must have offered just this sliver of hope to Jim and Nancy.
And the letters were convincing enough that the police took them seriously.
They did. Based on comparison with the Jane's known handwriting samples, the police believed the letters could potentially be authentic. The man, who called himself their guardian, nominated a specific meeting place where he claimed he would hand the children back.
I just can't imagine the agonizing hope and tension that must have created.
It's unthinkable. The Beaumonts went to the designated location. They were followed by a detective who was disguised, just to observe the scene discreetly. They waited, probably for hours, believing this decades-long nightmare was about to end. But nobody appeared.
The wait was fruitless.
Completely.
Yeah.
And the cruelty didn't end there.
The third letter?
The third letter arrived soon after. The ultimate psychological blow. Purportedly from Jane, it claimed the man had noticed the detective and had concluded that the Beaumonts had betrayed his trust.
And as a result?
As a result, he declared he would now keep the children forever. And after that, the letter stopped.
That third letter was just. It was calculated to inflict the maximum long-term guilt and agony.
For 2 decades, the Beaumonts lived with the possibility that their one attempt to recover their children, an action they had to take with the police, was the very thing that ensured they would never see them again.
The suffering that deception inflicted is just, it's difficult to grasp.
It is.
So how was this monumental deception finally unraveled? The parents lived with this for so long.
The truth only emerged much, much later. In 1992, thanks to significant advancements in fingerprint technology and forensic examination, the letters were conclusively proven to be a hoax.
And they found the author.
They did. He was identified as a 41-year-old man who admitted he had written the notes when he was a teenager. He claimed it was just a joke.
A joke. A joke that stole 24 years of potential peace from grieving parents.
Exactly. And due to the passage of time and the specific nature of the original crime, he was not charged with any offense. But the revelation, at least, ended the agony of them thinking they were to blame for the children not returning.
A pointless, heartbreaking deception that compounded the family's grief for nearly a quarter of a century. Even with the passing of decades, South Australia police have maintained an active, open file. They're continually re-examining high-profile criminals who were operating during that time, especially if they fit that consistent physical profile developed in 1966.
That's right. And let's start with Bevan Spencer von Einem.
A notorious figure.
Very notorious in South Australian criminal history. He was convicted of the murder of Richard Kelvin in 1984. Police already suspected him of involvement in a string of other murders, and and quickly noticed that he resembled the 1966 identikit from the Beaumont case.
But the most compelling link came from an informant.
Yes, an informant identified in reports as Mr. B, who was considered highly reliable in the Kelvin case. He provided a chilling account that directly implicated von Einem in the Beaumont disappearance.
What did he say?
Mr. B relayed an alleged conversation where von Einem boasted of taking 3 children from a beach several years earlier. And what made this account stand out was the level of disturbing detail. Von Einem allegedly claimed he had performed brilliant surgery on them and connected them up at his home for experiments. He boasted that one child died during the procedure, so he killed the other 2 and disposed of the bodies in bushland south of Adelaide.
That reference to surgery, that corresponds with other cases, doesn't it?
Terrifyingly so. It corresponded with details found in the coroner's reports for von Einem's other alleged victims who were subjected to similar mutilations. Mr. B also claimed von Einem implicated himself in the Adelaide Oval abductions of 1973, another case where von Einem matched the suspect's description. It suggests a pattern.
But there were hurdles for the investigators, right? Discrepancies.
Significant hurdles. The primary issue is the age discrepancy. The suspect seen in 1966 was estimated to be in his mid to late 30s. Von Einem was only in his early 20s at the time.
And the victims were different.
Yes, the Beaumont children were much younger than his usual targets, who were typically teenagers or young adults.
So you have this circumstantial evidence that is horrifyingly specific, the surgical detail, but it contradicts the physical profile from witnesses. How did police proceed with that?
Well, despite the age difference and the altered modus operandi, von Einem has never been ruled out as a suspect. He was identified as a suspect in a confidential police report in 1989. And in 2007, police examined archival footage from the original search.
From 1966.
From 1966.
Oh.
And it reportedly showed a young man resembling von Einem among the throng of onlookers at Glenelg Beach.
Wow. Implying an early connection to the location.
Or perhaps a fascination with the crime he was potentially about to commit or had just committed.
Next, let's turn our attention to Arthur Stanley Brown.
Brown was charged in 1998 with the 1970 murders of Judith and Susan Mackay in Townsville. And similar to von Einem, he bore a striking physical similarity to the identikit for both the Beaumont and the Oval cases.
He was a high-risk individual.
Undeniably. A suspected serial child killer. But the investigation into his involvement was complicated by his mental decline. His trial was delayed when he developed dementia and Alzheimer's, and he died in 2002 without ever being retried.
So the difficulty here is entirely about connecting him geographically to Adelaide in 1966. If he looks like the man, where was he?
That's the million-dollar question. Investigators spent immense effort trying to track his movements. They searched for his employment records, but they were missing.
Missing how?
Well, some were believed to have been lost in the 1974 Brisbane flood. But there was also chilling speculation that Brown, who had unrestricted access to various government buildings because of his work, may have deliberately destroyed his own files to cover his tracks.
So without definitive records, the connection is purely based on the composite sketch?
Mostly, yes. There were only tenuous circumstantial links. A witness later recalled a conversation with Brown where he mentioned seeing the Adelaide Festival Center nearing completion.
And that would place him?
That project would place him in the city around 1973, which is closer to the timing of the Oval abductions. But again, age is a major issue. Brown was 53 in 1966.
Much older than the mid-30s suspect.
Much older. The strategy here seems to be prioritizing the visual likeness over the age factor, perhaps assuming the witnesses just got the age wrong.
Okay, let's move to James Ryan O'Neill. He was convicted of the 1975 murder of a 9-year-old boy in Tasmania.
And O'Neill is reported to have told several acquaintances that he was responsible for the Beaumont disappearance, often through ambiguous or, boastful language.
A classic case of a suspect who talks too much.
It is. Former Detective Gordon Davey spent 3 years with O'Neill during the production of the 2006 documentary The Fisherman, and he was eventually persuaded of O'Neill's guilt. Davey highlighted O'Neill's work in the opal industry, which required him to travel frequently to Coober Pedy. And that travel schedule would have necessitated him passing through Adelaide.
Providing the opportunity.
The opportunity to be at Glenelg in 1966.
But O'Neill's denial, as noted in the sources, it was incredibly weak.
It was. He claimed, "I couldn't have done it. I was in Melbourne at that time." Which is an alibi, but a very thin one. It suggests an awareness of the crime and a calculated attempt to distance himself without a full denial.
But it wasn't enough to convince the authorities.
No. The South Australia police interviewed O'Neill, and after careful consideration, they officially discounted him as a suspect in the Beaumont case.
Which just demonstrates the difficulty of separating a high-risk individual's boast from actionable, credible evidence.
Exactly.
Next on the list is Derek Ernest Percy. a convicted child murderer, Victoria's then longest-serving prisoner. He was suggested as a suspect much later, in 2007.
Yes. Percy was convicted of Yvonne Tuohy's murder in 1969. During his defense for that crime, he claimed a psychological condition prevented him from accurately remembering details of his actions. This self-proclaimed memory condition led him to make a deeply speculative statement. He claimed he believed he might have killed the Beaumont children, as he was in the area at the time, but had no genuine recollection of it.
That sounds highly tenuous. It's based on an unreliable claim of possibility.
It is, and once again, the timeline and age discrepancy are immense. Percy was only 17 in 1966.
Far too young.
Far too young to match the mid-30s profile the witnesses consistently reported. Furthermore, his imprisonment from 1969 until his death means he could not be connected to the Adelaide Oval abductions, which, as we've said, many investigators believe are linked. His age alone made him highly unlikely.
So let's move to Alan Anthony Monroe, a former scoutmaster convicted of multiple child sex offenses spanning from 1962 to 1983. His connection is rooted in a very specific secondhand account.
Monroe's connection came via a man named Alan Maxwell McIntyre, who police had already cleared as a suspect. McIntyre claimed that Monroe brought the children's bodies in his car boot to McIntyre's home.
That is a horrific claim.
It is. And the detail that stood out was the claim that McIntyre's children initially mistook Arnna for a boy because of her short haircut.
That's a very specific detail about Arnna's appearance.
A very specific, potentially corroborating detail. And furthermore, in June 2017, new evidence surfaced in the form of a 1966 child's diary. It was written by one of McIntyre's sons, who was abused by Monroe. And this diary allegedly placed Monroe near Glenelg Beach around the time of the disappearance.
So we have a physical connection, a detailed secondhand account, and a plausible reason for the children's specific appearance. What's Monroe's official status in the case?
Well, police previously investigated Monroe, but despite the accounts and the diary evidence, they have found no definitive, first-hand evidence linking him directly to the Beaumont case. Without physical evidence or confession, the lead remains highly suspicious, but officially inconclusive.
And finally, we have to analyze Harry Phipps, a local factory owner who was brought to public attention in 2013 after the publication of the book The Satin Man.
And Phipps has arguably the strongest circumstantial link to the original crime scene.
Why is that?
Because he checks multiple boxes on the list of clues. He bore substantial likeness to the identikit. He was wealthy. He lived only 300 meters from Glenelg Beach.
300 meters.
Right on the doorstep. He was known to be in the habit of giving out £1 notes, a direct echo of that critical bakery clue. And he was alleged to be a pedophile.
And the timeline connection is equally strong thanks to his own estranged family.
Exactly. His estranged son, Hayden Phipps, came forward in 2007 with the claim that he had seen the children in his father's yard on January 26, 1966, the day they vanished.
That proximity and that exact timing are extremely compelling.
They are. And adding to this, there was the unsettling detail about the digging on his property soon after the disappearance. The hole. Two other individuals who were youths at the time claimed Phipps paid them to dig a large specific hole, described as 2 by 1 by 2 meters, at his North Plimpton factory yard that very weekend, for unstated reasons.
Which naturally suggests a potential burial site.
Of course. And this lead has resulted in multiple high-profile excavation efforts stretching across decades.
The first was in 2013.
Yes, November 2013. Ground-penetrating radar found one small anomaly, which can indicate soil disturbance. The dig itself yielded no definitive evidence. Then, based on renewed investigation, Adelaide detectives returned in February 2018 for a much more extensive second dig.
And that 2018 dig, it was exhaustive, but again, nothing.
Nothing related to the Beaumont case. They found only animal bones and general factory rubbish.
And there was a third search more recently.
There was. In February 2025, a third privately funded search was organized at the former factory site, focusing on different areas based on new analysis.
And the outcome.
The week-long search concluded, and tragically, once again, no remains of the children were found. Phipps died in 2004, taking any potential truth he possessed with him and leaving behind only this frustratingly strong circumstantial evidence.
The detailed facts of the case are horrifying, but the legacy of the disappearance it's perhaps even more critical to understanding Australian history. The Beaumont case is almost universally viewed as a seminal event, marking the definite, abrupt end of post-war Australian innocence.
This case fundamentally changed the culture of child supervision overnight. Prior to 1966, Australian society operated under this powerful assumption of safety. It was just taken for granted that unsupervised public travel for children like walking or taking a short bus trip to a popular beach was safe and acceptable. Children had a freedom of movement that is unimaginable in modern Western societies.
And that concept was immediately and irrevocably shattered. The Beaumont case, which was nationally publicized and remained unsolved, it acted as the tipping point.
It did. And it happened concurrently with other high-profile child-related crimes, like the 1960 Graham Thorne kidnapping and the 1965 Wanda Beach murders.
That accumulation of events forced parents to fundamentally rethink daily supervision.
The collective trust in community safety it vanished. It ushered in the era of stranger danger. Parents became fearful, not negligent. It led to a permanent change in Australian lifestyles, limiting children's independence and autonomy in public spaces. The freedom of the 1950s was definitively over.
Now let's turn our attention to the immense human cost of this. The parents, Jim and Nancy Beaumont, they received immense public sympathy, but that support could never alleviate their private, agonizing wait for answers.
Nancy, in particular, lived an existence that was defined by the hope of their return. She remained at the Somerton Park family home for years, clinging to the idea that the children would eventually come back. She stated in interviews that it would be dreadful if the children came home and didn't find their parents waiting for them. That intense, painful hope defined nearly every decision they made.
And they demonstrated incredible resilience. They fully cooperated with every single lead, no matter how far-fetched or emotionally taxing it was.
Yes, this included following up on wild claims that the children had been abducted by a religious cult and were supposedly living in New Zealand or Melbourne, or pursuing countless potential burial sites.
That cooperation demanded constant reliving of their trauma, and one of the most devastating acts against them came in 1990, inflicted not by a perpetrator, but by the media.
Yes. Without the parents' consent, newspapers published computer-generated age progression photographs depicting how Jane, Arnna, and Grant would have looked as adults.
The sheer callousness of that act is just difficult to reconcile with any kind of journalistic standards.
The parents were devastated. These images caused a huge wave of renewed public grief, forcing the Beaumonts and the community to confront the lost potential of their children as adults. This renewed public sympathy often meant renewed private suffering for Jim and Nancy.
And the constant, agonizing uncertainty. It eventually took an unavoidable toll on their marriage.
It did. Jim and Nancy eventually divorced and resolved to live separately, seeking to escape the intense, decades-long public attention that had followed them. They sold their Somerton Park home, but crucially, they kept the police informed of their new addresses, just in case that miracle return ever happened.
But ultimately, the source material indicates they reached a heartbreaking acceptance.
They did, an acceptance that the truth of their children's disappearances may never be discovered during their lifetimes. They lived in an emotional purgatory defined by not knowing.
That's the cruelest form of closure, isn't it? Just none at all. Nancy died in an Adelaide nursing home in 2019. She was 92. Jim died more recently in 2023, aged 97.
They both passed away without ever knowing what happened to Jane, Arnna, and Grant, making this one of the longest and most painful waits for justice in Australian history.
So when we synthesize all the available information, what stands out most?
I think what stands out is a case defined by a single, powerful contradiction. You have a remarkably strong, consistent witness profile, the mid-30s man with fair hair, that has consistently been linked to multiple high-risk individuals. Yet none of them could be definitively connected by physical evidence or a fully corroborated account.
Exactly. The lack of resolution stems from this paradox. You have detailed, credible witness accounts and compelling circumstantial links to figures like von Einem and Phipps, but you don't have the definitive forensic evidence. You don't have remains or a reliable confession. Nothing needed to prosecute and close the investigation.
And the case remains officially open. The police maintain an imperative that no murder investigation ends up in a closed file, especially one with such high societal significance.
And as we noted at the beginning, the government's commitment remains firm. They're maintaining that standing $1 million reward for information.
And that commitment ensures that every new technological advancement or every newly released diary entry will lead to a new look at this tragedy.
The enduring power of this case, I think, lies in how it reflects a specific moment in time. A time when a society's entire concept of safety was shattered by a single catastrophic unsolved event.
And the absence of a final answer created a vacuum filled by speculation and fear that profoundly impacted parenting, trust, and public life for generations to come.
It is a profound point to consider. Think about this as you move on with your day. Consider how the absence of an answer in a crime can continue to define community standards and public trust long after the events fade from living memory.
What other historical event fundamentally shifted the public trust and sense of safety in your community?
Thanks for listening.